audio becomes an issue, Seth, you're the designated guardian of acoustic integrity. Let us know if you're having trouble hearing back there. Welcome to Entrepreneurs Unplugged. My name is Brad Bernthal. I'm the director of the Entrepreneurship Initiative here at Silicon Flatirons. Delighted to have Scott Drake here. By way of background, how many of you have been to an Unplugged session before? All right, right on. I know that I know this. I expect many of you do not. Our first Unplugged session was 2007 or 2008. I said I thought I knew that. As far as you guys know, it was 2007, and our first guest over in engineering was Dan Caruso, was here. Great to see you here as well. In the way of who else, who's in the room, if you have a direct connection to the campus, that you're a student, staff, faculty, hand up. And from off campus? All right. I'm trying to think of some other ways to cut this. How about medical device people in the house? Should we do that one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Come on. So if you are from a medical device background, present or past?
I think Kramer qualifies for sure.
There's not very many of you. All right, anyway, it's a fun congregation to have in the rooms. It's not working. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. How about now? See, Seth, this is not my fault. This is yours. Anyway, this is fun. So what we're going to do is we'll do some community announcements. If you've got a company that is, say, looking to hire, if there's an event coming up or something else in the way of community announcements, we're going to pause for a second to do that. And then we'll have a chance for you to introduce yourself to someone around. I'm going to introduce Scott. We're going to do about 45, 50 minutes of Q&A directly, and then we'll open up for audience Q&A, and we'll wind up about 7, followed by a reception. Before we get going, I want to thank the Silicon Flatirons team. Our executive director, Amy Stepanovich, is right there. Vanessa, who's our event coordinator. Sarah Schnickgren just snuck out. We've got student volunteers. You get a chance, give them a hug and tell them thank you. This is a team where I get to do a lot of the talking, but it's a great team, and I'm really proud to be here at Silicon Flatirons. Let's start with events. Anyone got an event upcoming that they want to call out and announce? Amy, we have anything out of Silicon Flatirons coming up? The privacy event would be good to say a word about. Someone who many of you have probably not met yet is Margot Kaminsky, who is the director of our privacy initiative at Silicon Flatirons. Margot is a rising star, if not, just a full-blown rock star. She's going to be leading that privacy crash course. Should be good. Other upcoming events. Anyone looking to hire?
ARD. We'll talk about that in a minute.
You going to say a word?
Well, sure. Zayo's always looking to hire locally here, so fiber optics bandwidth, if you're interested, let me know or Danielle or Thing over here, and we'll get you the right person.
Awesome. Other events, announcements for the common good? All right, we've got tradition at Silicon Flatirons events. Find someone in your vicinity that you've not met before tonight. Take a minute, introduce yourself, and then we'll reconvene in about 3 minutes. Go.
All right, I got a part.
I'm going to try to bring people back to order. It's a good problem to have. Sometimes I find if I talk, bring the lapel mic in. Shh. Oh man, that's so effective. Shh. All right. Delighted to have Scott Drake here. Scott was part of a Silicon Flatirons event, I want to say about 4 or 5 years ago, that we did on hiring and culture, and just did a fabulous job. And as you guys will see, really an entrepreneur and CEO with a wide ranging background. Encourage you to take a look at the bio. Been involved with companies on the large side, including Covidian. On the smaller side, helping Just Right,
yep,
which we'll talk a little bit about, get launched, and currently is the CEO of ViewRay. So please help me welcome Scott Drake.
Thank you.
And I'd like to start kind of current, and then we'll work back through some of the stories. But maybe walk through, you sell Spectranetics.
Yeah.
It's a very happy
You're the
sale.
first person that said that correctly, ever. Yeah.
Does that mean I mispronounced
No,
it?
that was good. That was really good.
So you guys, your team has a collective, very happy exit. Walk us through from Spectranetics to ViewRay and where you are today.
Yeah, those things are really intertwined from my standpoint. We had a wonderful exit. We had a ball running a company down in Colorado Springs and had an amazing team. We were lucky and good along the way. We sell the company, and Susan could tell you maybe 2 months after the sale of the company, I was as bored as I could be. And I really missed not just being busy, but I missed being a part of a team and having a mission. And, I looked at a lot of different things like private equity and, do I live a more balanced life? And came to the conclusion with the guy who was my chief operating officer that some of you know, a guy named Sharmateen, that we really needed to be a part of something again. And after looking at big things, small things, public, private, you name it, we came up with 3 criteria that really kind of resonated with us. Number one, we wanted to do something that we thought would make a societal difference. We wanted to have a really positive impact on the world. So it had to be something that really mattered, we thought. 2, we love innovation. He's an engineer, I'm a commercial animal, and we fit together like peas and carrots as a result of that. And we wanted some cool technology. And after being really far down the path on a couple of big public company jobs that just made me feel kind of sick inside and heavy, we decided the 3rd criteria was we wanted something we could grow and scale. And so a board member of ViewRay, who has had a spectacular career in the medical device space, calls me out of the blue and tells me about this relatively small, about $100 million in revenue, capital equipment, low gross margin, public company. And I'm like, oh, that sounds terrific. What could possibly go wrong? Well, I'll tell you. So anyway, we joined this company, and to give you guys just a little bit of an idea about what we do, radiation therapy in current form is relatively barbaric, and it's heartbreaking to see its negative effects on patients. So if this is a tumor, with current technology, essentially what you do is wash this area with radiation therapy. And along with hitting the tumor, you're hitting a lot of healthy tissue at the same time. And what you're trying to accomplish is delivering enough of a dose over a long enough period of time that you let the healthy tissue grow back, but you deliver enough of a dose to the tumor to kill the tumor. So there's a positive effect, but there's an extraordinarily negative effect to it as well. And ViewRay, I have nothing to do with this at all, was conceived of an MRI and a linear accelerator that delivers the energy to live together in harmony, which is a massive physics challenge. And the inventor is still with the company. He's our chief scientific officer. So what we're capable of doing, and it's proven across hundreds of studies, is we only hit the tumor. And we preserve the healthy tissue. Grade 3 or higher toxicity is 0 across hundreds of studies. And what we're working on now is identifying, pretend the little bit of water in here is the biologically active part of the tumor. So we'll only hit that. And the benefits of that are the tumor becomes the margin, and the clinical benefit's profound, and so is the efficiency benefit. So generally speaking, radiation therapy is delivered over 39 fractions for prostate cancer. We deliver it in 5 or fewer. So the lifestyle implications of that are extraordinary. Many cancer patients actually go broke because they have to stop working and all the negative side effects associated with it. So there's these massive implications. But being a small public capital equipment, low margin company comes with its challenges, and that's what we're in the midst of working on.
All right, well, let's leave that as a cliffhanger that we're going to come back to in the next 30 or 40 minutes. I want to wind back a little bit. The NBA, National Basketball Association was your first calling, or so you thought.
I knew. When I was in elementary school and early in middle school, I couldn't conceive of any difference between me and Larry Bird. Height, mustache, hair color, sweet release. There was no difference. And I was going to play for the Celtics, and I, in middle school, realized when my friends were dunking that it was unlikely that I was.
Are you still a basketball fan today?
I love it, yeah.
So a passion to stay with you. Believe it or not, there is preparation that goes into these events. All right. So on the prep call,
on Brad's behalf,
on the prep call, I thought it was interesting. Usually the entrepreneurial stories go. I had no idea I wanted to be an entrepreneur. You know, I was careening off course. I did this. I did that. I think that you're the first entrepreneur who's like, yeah, I knew I wanted to be a CEO when you were in high school. Talk a little bit about how did you have that clarity?
An embarrassing admission, to be honest with you. I say that in all sincerity. It's such a nerdy thing to say. But I knew, honestly, I mean, I wanted to play professional basketball. Before you had like spotlights on the side of the house, I would drag a lamp out that had 2 extension cords, and my dad would get mad at me. But I literally thought I was going to the NBA. When I realized I wasn't, I was of the age of starting to think about college and what I would do. And, you know, I saw through various lenses of family and friends and whatnot that, you know, there may be something kind of cool to do there. And I remember an executive coming in from Procter & Gamble. I don't remember if he was the CEO or not, but I was living in Ohio at the time, and P&G was down the road. And I remember he came in and talked to us high school kids, and he talked in a very whole way about what he did. It was incredibly integrated. You know, it was head and heart. It was impact on a mission, working together as a team, impact on society, impact on his family. It wasn't about him or his checkbook, and I thought that really captivated me. And literally from that time forward, I was convicted and convinced I wanted to be a CEO, and then later a public company CEO, which is interesting. And so it was what I set my sights on. And the reason I say it's embarrassing is I meet with so many brilliant people. Met Matt tonight, who's looking for his next adventure. And I think about how broad people think about their experiences and what they want to do, and I was so tunnel visioned and focused. It's a bit embarrassing to admit that, but it's just true.
Any high school businesses or college businesses that came out of it?
Oh, very sophisticated. I cut grass, which nobody cuts grass anymore. I don't know what's wrong with all you young people, but you should cut grass. You should do landscaping. You should shovel. I actually had a business that I was making at the time, you know, about 10 grand a summer, landscaping and shoveling and doing that kind of stuff. And then in college, I collected trash. And my first promotion was going from holding on to the back of a trash truck to being on what we called the street crew. You didn't tell me you were going to ask about this, but, you know, shoveling dead animals into a back of a pickup truck and trimming branches and things. It was glamorous. Early experiences that naturally led to medical devices.
Did you hire anybody in connection with those businesses?
My landscaping business.
Huh?
Yeah.
What did it look like?
You know, just somebody dumb enough to take a fraction of what I would make cutting a lawn, and I got the whole thing, and they got a part of it. That was brilliant. I mean, it was early learning, and you know, not a lot of it, but a little.
So you go to Miami of Ohio for university. I assume...
A couple of Red Hawks in the room, by the way. Yeah.
And wind us forward from there into start a professional career.
Yeah. So I remember thinking about what's the fastest way to get from Oxford, Ohio to, again, I'm embarrassed to say this, but it's true, to a CEO job. And I thought, you know, I wasn't terrific at math, so it wasn't going to be engineering or probably a finance path, so I was probably going to do it commercially. So I wanted a great sales job, and I thought about industries where sales mattered, and I didn't start there. Actually, the biggest blessing of my life was starting at a company called Westvaco, which is now Mead Westvaco, where I was a horrible sales rep, but I met Susan, so it was a smashing hit, and went from there pretty quickly. I got my first bonus check as a sales rep, and I don't remember if I cashed it or framed it. It was an insult to all bonus checks. So I left the paper industry and was...
What kind of paper were you selling?
Well, they were fine papers, Brad. Literally, it was the fine papers division of Westvaco. I know. It's not much above the office, but slightly. We're trying to get... Susan was actually really good at it. We were trying to get magazines to specify our paper, because clearly it was better. I couldn't tell the difference. And we were trying to get companies to put their annual reports on our paper. And it wasn't that interesting, except socially. And then I, for the first time, really thought about what industry do I want to be a part of.
Before we transition
Sure.
out of that, though, you're not the first entrepreneur who has said, I started in sales.
Mm-hmm.
And for some, it just felt like a natural fit. For others, it was a real struggle. But almost invariably, I hear, I'm so glad that I started in sales.
Yeah,
Is
incredible.
that your story? Or
Totally,
not?
yeah.
And so if you were going back to talk to someone who's, say, 23, wants to cut their teeth, what's the case for starting in sales?
Huge. I think any time you have a customer-facing role, everything that you do as an organization is brought to bear when a sales rep sits down with a customer. Everything. So it's an incredible learning opportunity. For me, it was a means to an end. Again, my tunnel focus at the time. But it's a wonderful career as well. I mean, we have one of our sales teammates in the room. Where's Corby? You can have a fantastic living, make a great impact. But for me, candidly, it was I want to get that experience and I want to go from there.
Okay, so wind us forward from paper is not your future.
Paper to medical devices. I worked for a company called American Hospital Supply that then became Baxter. I was a slightly better sales rep, not off the charts. I was decent. I was very hardworking and okay. And then I had the opportunity to be promoted both internally at Baxter into a marketing role, and then another company concurrently. It's kind of like when I'm not a very good fisherman either, but when you fish and you have one on the line, I'm more apt to get one. I had two opportunities. And the other opportunity was with a company called Kendall Healthcare to be a region manager. My first opportunity managing people. I was 25 years old, and that was the job that I took, managing a group of sales reps.
What were the medical devices that were being sold?
Kendall at the time, so just macro context, Kendall was the base company that became Tyco Healthcare of Tyco International fame, Dennis Kozlowski going to jail, the shower curtain, all that. We were the healthcare foundation of what was Tyco International when Dennis wanted to be the next GE. We then bought everything under the sun, literally, and became Covidian and then sold that for $42 billion to Medtronic and a bunch of learning associated with that. But way back at that time, we were selling wound care products, vascular compression, and urology were our three main product lines.
As you reflect on those years, sort of learning the industry, gaining business expertise, one mentor who imparted a set of lessons to you and what you took away from that, and then I'm interested also in, you just saw something that I didn't like this about the company, and in my notes about if I'm ever running things, this ain't happening. I'd like to hear one of each. So maybe a mentorship experience that was formative for you.
John Hammergren was my boss actually, he was my boss's boss when I got my first promotion in-house. Going from the field to an in-house job, John was an all-star. Recently retired as the chairman and CEO of McKesson, I think a Fortune 5 company. Just a crazy smart business person and a very good human being. John taught me the importance of what separates one career from another. He was very much wired like I am, a lot more talented, but very driven. And he taught me through example and word the importance of hard work. And I remember when I first got that job, I went into the office in Mansfield, Mass. On the first day, and I thought, if I outwork John Hammergren, I've done something. And get to the office first day at 7 a.m., John's there. The next day I get in at 6:30, John's there. The next day, 6 o'clock, John's there. And I'm like, oh, this is gonna hurt. So I had to get to the office between 5:30 and 5:45 to beat John into the office. And that sounds like a really low-level goal, right? You're gonna beat somebody into the office. But what he taught me, again, through word and deed, hard work separates. Intellect doesn't necessarily separate. You have to be smart enough at something. But if Dan's gonna work 80 hours a week and I'm only gonna work 40, in a year he's worked 2 and I've only worked 1. So whether you're talking about how you're competing externally or even internally with teammates, for that job that you want, hard work separates. That lesson stuck. And I may have overlearned it in some ways, but it was incredibly beneficial. Lesson that also stuck that I would never do, and I would share, if your experiences are anything like mine, I had more bad bosses than good, by far, like 80, 90, 10 or 20. And you have to learn from everybody. You have to be grateful to everyone, but you can learn what to do and what not to do. And I remember our CEO at the time, here I am just busting my tail. I had my team in, and we were having a pretty big meeting, and I asked our CEO, his name is Rich, I said, Rich, could you find 10 minutes today just to come, spend with the team? And he couldn't and didn't. And I thought, gosh, what an impact you can have just by the position that you're in, and you should think about how to leverage that. And that's a lesson that I think kind of stuck with me as well. You can weaponize culture in a really positive way.
A unique aspect, I think, is as you're along your journey, you've got a vision that you want to be a CEO.
Yep.
Would you keep notes along the way? Was there like a linear path? And talk a little bit about preparing yourself for a CEO role.
Gosh, I wish I had a super smart answer to that because I've got a bunch of teammates in the room. No, I didn't. I had learnings. I had things that really impacted me, but I didn't have a script. I had a set of goals. I still have it in my nightstand. I would be way too embarrassed to bring it out and show you, but it's a great reminder of kind of where I was, what was important to me then, what's important to me now, and I looked at it recently for the first time in years. But the experiences that really stuck with me, I remember when I took that job when I was 25 years old, managing a group of people. I went into that job incredibly naively thinking about what it meant to manage and lead a team. I went into it thinking that everybody would be as hardworking and as prepared as you or I might be. And I went into it also thinking in terms of addition versus multiplication. What do I mean by that? I mean, I was going to help each one of those sales reps, close a piece of business 1 quarter sooner, 2 quarters sooner, so I could add to what they were doing, addition thinking. And then, I got no training, right? I'm 25 years old. I'm living in Detroit. I cover Detroit, Cleveland, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Rochester. Lots of regional jet miles on US Air. And what becomes immediately apparent is not everybody is really prepared. Not everybody is really thoughtful. Not everybody's working hard. And so I started to think, hey, this isn't about me adding to what they're doing. This is about me doing what I now I've called for 20 years ARD, attract, retain, and develop the top talent on the planet. And I went from spending my time trying to help people close a piece of business to spending a huge proportion of my time thinking about who's on the team And if you do ARD well, the sky is the limit. There's nothing you can't do with the right group of people. So that was huge learning for me early on.
Wind us forward to spectranetics.
Okay. Maybe one stop along the way, if I could. So I learned a little bit about the people thing, and here I am, tunnel vision kid, wanting to be, CEO of a company, not even really knowing what that meant, and I became a general manager at somewhere in my young to mid 30s, and at what was then Tyco Healthcare. That was a huge thing, right? It's the old American hospital supply culture. That was, that's a tree that many CEOs have come from, and becoming a general manager when you're within that universe was the sign that you've arrived. And I was so incredibly happy when that promotion took place. And then that night I laid down and I started to think about all the things that I didn't know about manufacturing, about quality, about clinical, about regulatory, about legal, about HR, about finance. And it was the most daunting feeling of, kind of the dog that caught the trash truck, right? What do I do? And that, being a region manager, being a general manager, and then being a CEO were the three most, from a career standpoint, learning intensive experiences. And what I, like I learned about ARD early on, attract, retain, and develop talent, what I learned in that role was to be very generous by raising my hand often and saying, I don't know. Teach me that at an 8th grade level. And my team would tell you, how often did I say it today, you guys? Probably 5 times. I say it every day. Teach me that at an 8th grade level. And on one narrow side, obviously, it's a way to learn, right? When somebody teaches you something at an 8th grade level, it's simple. You see it in the context of what it is that you're working on. And I'm so blessed that I work with world experts in every meeting that I'm in. It's people that are that wide and that deep on a regulatory matter. How do we gain access to China, right? Or a legal matter that is incredibly complicated, and we've got inside and outside counsel and the smartest people in the world on whatever the issue is. And so I've just made it a habit to say, you guys stop. Explain that to me at an 8th grade level. So it's good learning for me. I think it models good behavior. You're more apt to have a learning culture when you, as the CEO or leader, say, hey, help me learn here, as opposed to, let's all fake it, like we know it, and nobody learns, and it's awful. And the third thing that I've learned about that now I'm revealing secrets, this is huge. My batting average on this is super high, and other areas really low. But what you learn about people when you say, teach me at an 8th grade level, people bifurcate. The really smart people start their sentences with, oh, this is really simple. Think of it this way. And they tell you like that. And others that stroke their chin and say, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. This is really complicated. It's a really good indicator of who's on the team. And it's helped me, find my way relatively quickly, taking on new teams in my career. What was your question?
That second group might become professors.
Yeah.
No, I got to believe, I've got a story, though, that what you're getting at is the individuals who can break it down and make it simple probably are the experts.
They're the masters.
In terms of they're able to see it from and then if you poke on them, they'll go as deep as you want.
As deep as you want.
Before we leave the general manager position, I love that realization that you're laying in bed and like, oh, I've just gotten what I wanted, and there's all these ways they could go wrong. Pick one in which, one dimension of your game that, like, I was deficient.
Oh, yeah, wow.
Maybe I was self-aware, maybe it wasn't, but just one of them. And then how did you go about, getting yourself up to the level that at least to perform as a high-functioning general manager, you really upped the game in that dimension? First
month, you might remember our plant in Tijuana, Mexico. with about 3,000 or 4,000 people in this manufacturing plant. I have spent precisely 0% of my career in manufacturing. I'm going to do a town hall meeting in Tijuana with security guards in front of thousands of people, and I know nothing about manufacturing. That's a super comfortable position to be in. And my Spanish ends at hola. So it was extraordinary. So your choice is, do I just come in and use my position authority, or am I very respectful? Am I open to learning? Do I get to know people personally and professionally? Do I get out there on the floor and ask people what they're doing, what we could do better, how are we treating them, how are we driving you nuts, and really hear the voice of our team? That's what I chose to do, and you learn a boatload about that. And so consequently, your calendar is your biggest weapon, right, in your business life. So I would schedule time, even at Spectranetics, I would put on my calendar time to go on the manufacturing floor. I knew the teammates by name. I understood what they did. We always identified their biggest problems and solved them. That's a very simple way of thinking about how to run a business. Understand what delights your teammates, understand what delights your customers, allocate capital, and do a vital few and key driver set, and don't peanut butter your resources. But, it sounds really simple, but that's kind of what helped me climb the learning curve, not only in manufacturing, but in a lot of other areas.
Was it natural for you to go on the floor, meet the workers who were making products, or was that something that you had to learn how to do?
No, it's when you're not an expert, it's uncomfortable, right? And so it's forced internally, but hopefully it doesn't come across forced. My wife would tell you that if I had the choice between going out to dinner with one couple or going to a big cocktail party, I would way rather go to dinner with one couple. Because you interact with so many people throughout your day, you want to just have fun with who you love. So I hope it comes off a little bit more natural than how it feels. But there's a fair amount of, okay, I got to do this.
Take us forward to Spectranetics.
Okay.
How'd you get the position?
So I was at DaVita. You guys may know DaVita. They're based here in Denver now. And the idea was I was going to be Kent Theory's successor. He was going to work for 2 more years, and I was going to take over. 8 years later, he was still there. So at the 2-year point...
Can we stop for a second?
Sure.
Life Rule 272, being a CEO in waiting or being a head coach in waiting never works out.
Not good.
No.
It's not
Okay.
good. So to his credit, he had on his calendar a meeting 2 years in. He's a very thoughtful guy, very smart. And he said, hey, I'm not leaving, basically. And I said, good, I am. And he said, no, don't. That's crazy talk. We'll reorganize the company. We'll do this and that. And I culturally, it was not a fit for me. I think the culture there has improved quite a bit. I know there's maybe 1 or 2 of you that were at DaVita, so I don't mean any offense. But it was wacky, and it was not for me. I mean, if I was going to take over and have a little more control, it might have been fine. But I told him I was leaving. He said, we're getting together in a week. I want you to sleep on it and come tell me what would have to be so for you to stay. And I met with him a week later, and I said, I'm leaving. And I had turned down the Spectranetics role. I didn't interview for it. I was very happy doing what I was doing. But then they circled back, and I said, well, interestingly, the timing may work out. And so it was a really cool company.
Maybe we could baseline what Spectranetics did.
Okay, so Spectranetics was a company that was founded by 2 just wicked smart scientists. And they had technology out of SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, that was developed at the Air Force Academy for military purposes that they repurposed for clearing out blockages in the heart and the legs for vascular and coronary disease. And they developed this laser technology that allowed us to remove pacemakers and defibrillators from the heart, called lead removal. So those were the 2 primary businesses that we had at the time. I interviewed him and tricked him into hiring me, and I'm thrilled that worked out.
What year did you take over?
2011? Is that right? 10 or 11?
As far as we know, 2011, you
Yep.
take over as CEO.
Yep.
And one of the interesting parts of your journey is between Spectranetics and ViewRay, you are taking the baton from a group of founders, a group of scientists that have established a company and taken it to a certain point, and now you're being brought in because there's certain chokes that have been reached or issues, but also the promise that we could scale this up. Talk a little bit about coming into a company that's, you're not starting from zero. This is different than a startup.
Yep. It was, Spectranetics was really interesting at the time. In fact, our chief operating officer, who was there then, he's the only executive that made it through, wonderful guy, who's our chief operating officer today at ViewRay. I remember interviewing with him, and he said to me, "Why do you want this job?" And then it made me think, like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't. And so the company wasn't in great shape. It was, I don't know, what were we, 100 million in revenue at the time. Our market cap was about 130 million. We were trading at about 1 times revenue. In medical devices, if you're any good, you're at 4 or higher. The growth rate was pretty flat. The previous CEO had been indicted on, 2 CEOs ago had been indicted on 11 counts of doing bad things. The CEO after him, who was my kind of predecessor, was called the Seagull CEO, who would fly in, poop on everybody, and fly back out. I thought it was a great moniker. Never heard it before. And then he got whacked, and then there were 3 people running the company: the COO, the head of commercial, and the CFO. So it was a little bit of a disaster, but the underlying technology was fantastic. And I believe, I hope this doesn't sound arrogant in any way, it's actually quite a humble thought. If you have the right recipe, you can take virtually any asset and turn it into something pretty cool. And that team did that. We went from $100 and some odd million market cap and $100 million in revenue to $300 million in revenue and a $2.2 billion exit in 6 years. The team did amazing things, but we focused on 4 things that really matter. And I think this is true across startups, big global multi-billion-dollar companies, and everything in between. There's 4 things I believe that really matter in leading a team and leading a company. The most important one I already told you. Anybody remember what it is?
ARD?
ARD, attract, retain, develop the top talent on the planet.
I'm ready to be a CEO.
You're ready.
Yeah.
You're ready. If you do that well, you can do anything in the world. Factually true. With the right team, you operate with wicked strategic clarity. Why do I say wicked? I'm from Boston. I root for all of the correct teams. Go Pats. And wicked connotes something, right? It's a memorable word, and it's identifying the most important things that are going to delight your 2 most important constituents. If ARD is 1, who's your most important constituency that you serve?
Employees.
Your team. No. Employees are teammates that stole from you. Your teammates are your most important constituency. Understand what is really going to move the needle for your team and invest heavily in that. And your second most important constituency are your customers. There's kind of a chronology and logic to that. So if we ARD better than anybody, and we really show up for our team when life happens, because life happens to all of us, right? Kids are born, people die, people get married, people get divorced, teenage kids act like teenage kids. You show up for your team. That team is in a position to serve customers in a viscerally better and different way than most people are prepared to show up for their customers. But understand what's going to move the needle for those 2 constituencies. Cut that list way down. Do very few things. Staff those things to the 9s. And do them like crazy. In ViewRay, we have 8 vital few and key drivers that we're working on right now. We meet every Monday on those things. And what happens when you operate that way is you don't slip gears. And whatever you say you're going to do, you do. Your team's confidence, your customer's confidence in you just goes up, and it's kind of this wonderful spiral of success. It's not always easy, but fundamentally that's what we do. So ARD, wicked strategic clarity, execute as if lives depend on it, because indeed in our case they do. And the bookend to ARD is culture. Be really thoughtful and purposeful about culture. And there's no shortage of gray-haired people like me that say words like talent management and culture. And I would challenge them to pull out their calendar. Show me what you did over the last 90 days, and I'll show you what matters to you. How much time did you spend on ARD? How much time did you spend living your shared values and honoring teammates that live their shared values? You can weaponize culture in the most beautiful way, but you have to live it and you have to spend time on it.
You said that 5 years ago, or whenever you were here last, that show me your calendar for the last 90 days, and I'll tell you your values.
Tell you what matters.
That's always stayed with me. Going back to the situation at Spectranetics, you take the baton, you really believe in the technology, but there's probably trust issues within the organization. Culturally, there's challenges. How did you get your arm around it, and how did you identify this is the team that I'm going to move forward with?
Yeah, well, first day, before I started, I think the company still owes me money. I was working before they started paying me. I got to look into this, but I did a town hall meeting a week before I started, and I had this conversation with the team. And we talked about ARD, wicked strategic clarity, execution, and culture. And I had a teammate, her name's Candace. Candace raised her hand and she said, you know, this sounds great, but I've seen your type, you know, time and again. I'll tell you in a little while whether or not any of that, you know, nice sounding words are real. And that's how it began, and we live that, and we try to live it better every day. And what's really interesting about it, I think it's a great recipe. It works. It's worked across the diversity of businesses over a long period of time. I am dyed in the wool. You can't convince me that there's a better way. If there is, I'm happy to learn about it, but those 4 things will be present. And I've seen when a team leaves, when we had Valley Lab here, some of us were at Valley Lab, that business went from, Tom, you were there, we went from small to really big. I don't know how big it is now, billions. And when I got there, we were maybe $100 million in revenue. Most amazing group of scientists and engineers. A lot of engagement with CU still to this day with that group. And we just took off and had a ball. And we lived those things. And then we were asked to go run a bigger set of businesses in California. And then there's the absence of that. Or at Spectranetics, when we were acquired by Philips, the absence of intentional culture manifests itself in a way where you see the impact, not only when you're in the midst of it, you see the impact when it's no longer like that. And the people want to be a part of that. I mean, I think we have 30 some odd people at ViewRay that we've worked with in various groups along the way, and Just Right is the same thing. And you see the power of it when you're present, and you see what's viewed as hypocrisy when it's not.
Spectranetics, to the point of execution, execute as if your life depends on it, that third prong. You guys made a purchase that turned out to be shrewd.
It was a good one.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Some of these folks were involved in it. So here we are, this little company. We're starting to perform a little bit better. We're the little engine that could. We clearly saw strategically where the puck was going in the vascular space. It wasn't a searing insight. People were getting more and more interested in drug-coated balloons, so you could keep a vessel open without leaving something behind, right? So you would inflate a balloon with the drug. It would hold the vessel open, and you don't have to leave a stent. So better than leaving something inside the body. We went about looking at every drug-coated balloon asset literally in the world. and we come upon a company in the Bay Area called CV Ingenuity, run by a guy named Duke Rowland, who's just a terrific guy, super smart. We fall in love. We're convinced this is the best technology. We put the company in play, and Covidian comes and pays $300 million for a zero revenue company. And little old Spectranetics, you know, we brought a pea shooter to the knife fight, and we lost, right? They paid $300 million. They put $100 million into that asset while they were developing it. And then when Covidian and Medtronic came together, that deal was intentionally leaked in the Wall Street Journal on a Saturday. Remember this like it was yesterday. We convened a team call on that Saturday, and we said, hey, get to work, our business development, small little business development team, get to work identifying the assets that overlap between those two businesses. And let's go shopping. Let's see what's there. And that one struck. We're like, oh my gosh, they have 2 drug-coated balloons. The regulators are not going to let them have 2. They're not going to let them bury one. They're going to have to sell it. They're not going to want to sell it to Abbott or Boston Scientific, right? Natural predator. They're going to want to sell it to little old me or somebody like that rhymes with us, right? Some little company that they're not worried about. So we're going through all of this kind of strategic thinking, and the good part about, one of the many good parts about Covidian is we did 40 some odd deals in about a 4 or 5 year period of time. We made every mistake in M&A that you can make. But we bought a couple of good things along the way and maybe learned. So we're thinking strategically, well, if they can get $500 million or more from Boston Scientific or Abbott, we can't compete. So when my phone rings, I knew the business development team really well. When they call me, I'm going to tell them, you know what, we have our own program, which had the merit of truth, but we really wanted that asset. But I'm going to tell them that, hey, we can't pay anything for it. If you really need to get rid of it, call us back, but we can't compete. And so I was in Tokyo on a treadmill, and my phone rang, and it was Dennis Crawley, and I'm like, this is the phone call. And we were off to the races. He's like, hey, remember you said you wouldn't pay much for it, but you guys would take it kind of thing, and blah, blah, blah. Well, we worked around the clock, kind of like we're doing right now, and we end up buying this drug-coated balloon. It was the only asset in the way of a $42 or $43 billion deal that had $400 million in it. We bought it for $30 million. And I remember a couple sell-side analysts wrote pieces. One said we stole it, which wasn't very creative. The other one said it's the Louisiana Purchase in medical device history, which was kind of cool. It was a little bit true, too, because here we are. You know, we had to prove to the regulators that we could do as well or better with this asset than Covidian, this monster company, right? And we hired a cravat lawyer, Christine Barney, who ran the FTC. You may know Christine. She's super active politically. And she was able to convince, along with, you know, our silly presentation, that we could do better. But those are the, you know, experiences that you have as a small company that you don't have as a big company.
Before we leave Spectranetics, first time as CEO for you, I'm interested in the doubt. Like, I mean, there's always questions about whether a strategy is working in your life or not. But many of us occupy positions where there's not that much we can do about it. We're being told what to do, and we might not like the strategy, maybe micro changes. But you know, when you're running the company, you've got a lot to say about the strategy, and you took over a company that wasn't exactly hitting on all cylinders. I welcome a point in which you had real doubts. And how did you deal with doubt, or did you have doubt along the way?
Yeah, you have doubt, but you have great team, and you have great process around developing strategy. That's not the area that struck me as the doubt part. I'm happy to answer the doubt question, but I think if you have really good processes around understanding what your team wants and what your customers want, that's knowable. And then it's simply a matter of allocating capital and going hammer and tongs at those things. I don't find that to be all that difficult. Where doubt creeps in, Q1 2015, maybe a $60 million quarter, we missed by couple $100,000 in revenue. We lost 28% of our market cap in one day. And people thought everything we touched was going to turn to gold. And immediately, my CFO and I went on the road. We did a non-deal roadshow, met with every investor. It was just our instinct to get out there and meet with people. And they were kind of shocked. They're like, we thought you guys would be hiding for a while. And we were like, no, we want to tell you what we're doing because we think it's the right stuff. But, we had a tiny miss and we were priced to perfection, but we think you should hang in there with us. And investors ended up making fabulous amounts of money. But that's hard. For me, the way I'm wired, disappointing people, I would rather piss you off than disappoint you. I'd rather you slug me in the nose than tell me, oh, Scott, you disappointed me. That was really hard. And that felt really lonely. Dan, you can attest to how it feels. I mean, being out there, and so much is known about you today as a public company officer, CEO in particular. People know how much money you make. They hate it. It's crazy, right? We talk about this. People don't care that Oprah's worth, billions of dollars, but they care deeply about how much money a CEO makes, independent of the impact that she or he is having on a team or a society. It's a very interesting thing. And then you let people down in the midst of what's already kind of a interesting situation. And that hurts. I mean, that to me was very lonely feeling. I think.
What'd you do?
I got on the road and I talked to people. And we worked really, really, really hard to not disappoint people again. But it's kind of indigenous. I mean, public company life has gotten really, really hard. We're ruining, I think, in America, now I'll soapbox a little bit here. I think activism, shareholder lawsuits, so much money, trillions of dollars sloshing around in the world, fewer public assets. Investors have a harder time separating themselves, so you get this peculiar behavior that I don't think existed even 5 or 10 years ago on the street. That is, it's a dark art, and we'll end up with fewer and fewer public assets over time as a consequence of it. The legal aspects, the dealing with investors, it's candidly, it's not that fun.
Statistically, the apex in terms of number of public companies in the United States was about 1998. We are now back to pre-1977 levels in terms of numbers of public companies. Obviously, there's a lot of complexity. One question I have is in terms of value creation, how do some of those pressures affect your ability to make decisions for the long term when you know that you're going to get beat up in the next quarter because of that investment?
It's what we're doing right now. I mean, we live that day to day. I mean, we know. I will tell you unequivocally, if this is being recorded, I'm not telling you to buy our shares, but I know that we are moving the market to our technology. I don't know when it's going to happen, but we are making investments. We are developing our team. We are developing our vital few and key drivers in a way that will move this market. We are investing clinically in a space that has only been driven previously by technology that should only matter in terms of the impact that it has clinically. And we are showing the way with clinical data that takes time. There's no question in my mind that we're doing the right stuff, but we're getting the tar beat out of us at the moment because Wall Street cares whether we get literally 7 orders. These are super expensive, big machines. 7 orders in a quarter in Q1, Wall Street loved. 3 orders in Q2, we went down 70% of our market cap. 8 orders in Q3. I mean, it's just bananas when you're dealing with the law of small numbers and you're literally at the front end of changing a paradigm of care. But Wall Street is Wall Street. And I mean, there still are some long-only investors out there that'll support companies like ours, but the pathway is not for the faint of heart.
Let's stay with ViewRay in terms of running another public company. Something that you mentioned before in terms of the criteria for selecting the next thing after Spectranetics, which are, at this point, you've had enough success as a CEO. I got to believe that you were dealing from a position of strength at this point, right? Social mission.
Yep.
As it relates to running a medical device company and being part of that team, talk about how that affects the way your sense of purpose in connection with your job, and then how does that work with the team as well?
Yeah, I'll personalize it. I feel blessed. That's the best word I can come up with. When my feet hit the floor in the morning, I have an opportunity that day to save, improve, and elongate lives. I can't think of a better way of spending my career. And that's how we and I think about what we're doing. And Susan reminds me when I get stressed out about silly things like share price, she just says, think of your mission. And it immediately, you envision a cancer patient that's been told you have no other options. Go home and say goodbye to your family. You can't have any more surgery. You can't have any more radiation therapy because of the damaging side effects that I described earlier. And they're being treated on our system, and they're living these wonderful, fruitful, pain-free lives. And you know what? I can deal with some short-term pain to help, drive this technology around the world and help some cancer patients along the way. Cancer is such a personal thing to everybody in this room, right? We've all been either personally affected or we have a very close loved one that's been affected by it. So it's not hard to dig into that well, and that's kind of where we get to live.
I want to come back to ViewRay, and we'll do that in the Q&A with other participants here shortly. But you also got involved with Just Right, and maybe you talk about how did you come to become part of that startup, and explain what Just Right does.
Yeah, so Just Right, again, back to Valley Lab, just the most brilliant set of engineers on the planet. And we had the good fortune of being able to unleash that team in such a beautiful way. It's my second favorite career experience. I hope it's going to be my third favorite at some point. It was beautiful. And if you study surgery at all, surgery went from open, right, where you open somebody up, lots of anesthesia, lots of pain medication, long hospital stays, to laparoscopic. It was almost a generational change. We thought we could drive it faster than we did. Then it went from laparoscopic to mini-lap. Then it went from mini-lap to robotics. And that's how we as adults are operated on today. That same gift has not been given to the pediatric market. And we're like, my gosh, there's these kids. And I remember Steve Rothenberg. Tom, I don't know if you remember Steve, but he's probably the best pediatric surgeon in the world, and we're so fortunate to have him in Denver. Steve asked me when I was the president of Valley Lab if we would do the same thing in pediatrics that we did in adults. And maybe you get to know me a little bit through our time here, but I said no to him. And he was on our advisory board. And he knew the intentionality of our company. And we're like this, we're knee to knee. And he said, will you do this for peds? And back to my 4 things, right? Strategic clarity. I'm like, Steve, I can't. We're competing every day with Johnson & Johnson. Frankly, we're kicking their tail. It was really fun. But if we took our eye off that ball, there's no way we would have continued to have the success that we were having if we went into this whole other area. And we did a student body left to solve the problems that we were solving. Vital few, key drivers, hammering away. And I said no. He got teary-eyed, and he said, I thought I knew you. And that stuck. And so...
Change your mind.
No.
No.
Wicked strategic clarity. Just be wicked. No, it didn't change my mind. We did the right thing, I think, strategically. But
can I just ask about your decision-making process, which is, I put myself into your shoes there, and I could just see myself starting to rationalize, well, God, we're talking about kids, and here's a world-class doctor, and we could probably make this additional market work. Does that go through your mind, or are you just like, no?
No.
It's clear.
Look, God willing, I hope I'm a good human being. Of course, right? That just totally. I mean, to this day, I can remember that moment viscerally, and he's a dear friend of mine, and it stuck with me. But we debated it, but it was clear that if we went in that direction, serving a whole nother set of surgeons, we were going to undermine the success that we were having as a company. but still the thought stuck. And when the culture changed and these awesome teammates of ours kept calling me saying, you know what, we don't like it anymore, it's not any fun, it's corporate-y, it's paint by the numbers. I remember saying to Dale Schmaltz, who some of you guys know, I said to Dale on the phone, he was kind of whiny at the time, and I said, dude, quit whining or quit. If you quit, let's do something. We'll figure it out. But if not, if you're going to just keep doing it and whining, then call somebody else. I said it nicer than that, but that was kind of the message. So we decided, Dale and I, and we were the first two, and then we had a few others join us along the way, and we went through this whole kind of strategic planning exercise. And the third person it was Dale and I first. The third person we met with was Steve Rothenberg. And we went and met with Steve down at Presbyterian St. Luke's, had eggs, and we said to Steve, hey, do you remember the conversation when we said no? He set his fork down, looked at me, he's got these steely eyes, and he said, remember it like it was yesterday. And I said, well, what if we wanted to help now? And he said, I'm yours. And from there to here, now they've got a partnership with Intuitive Surgical, which is a $60-odd billion market cap company, and they're doing really good things in the world, doing for pediatrics what should have been done many years ago, and those instruments will be adopted in the adult world, I believe. So it was slower going than we thought, took more capital than we thought, but they're going to end up doing fabulous work.
What was your role with the company at the start?
Oh, gosh. I mean, it was crazy because I had a full-time job at the time.
Were you with Spectranetics at that time?
No, I was with DaVita.
Okay, before that. Yeah.
And we're meeting at our house and a few, the Kennedy's house, and I kind of did two jobs and got the thing propped up and got it capitalized a bit. Eric was on our board, and they're doing good stuff.
I want you to contrast your role as a founder with Just Right with your role as a public company CEO. So we were just in here, as a matter of fact, with the venture capital class yesterday morning, talking about the different types of CEOs that are often appropriate for a company at different stages of the life cycle.
Yeah.
That a founder CEO, often inspired, sort of drawn by passion, willing to go in different directions. At some point, the company needs to focus. We found product market fit, bring in a professional. Does that echo true for you, or what's your experience been like?
Well, I think there's two possibilities. I think there are CEOs that are right for a point in time, and I think there are very few, Dan's one of them, that can span from startup to running something of scale. I don't know if I'm in that category. I did have the good fortune of living in a big company for a long period of time. And one of the benefits of large companies, if you pay attention, is there's excellence there. May not be everywhere, but there's excellence there. And if you learn about things like talent management, you learn about things like strategic planning processes, and you get things simple, you get the right things simple and smart, you can use that anywhere. And that person could probably effectively go from startup to big public company. They do exist, right? But they're unicorns. There's not too many of them.
I want to ask one more question, then we're going to open it up. And we have got a policy at Silicon Flatirons that the first question goes to a student.
Perfect.
So, we're in the law school, so the Socratic method can be used if there's no volunteers. One more question. You talked about no substitute for outworking others. Mm-hmm. We reconnected last spring around a daughter's tennis match. Our daughters were out there playing tennis. As you've had a family, how has that sense of, in order to do my job, I've just got to be there at 5:45 in the morning or whatever it is at this point, how have you managed that dedication to work as you've had a family and gone through different life events?
Well, Billy's here. He might be able to speak to this better than I can. I really hope, in the midst of, I think, maybe outworking some people, that I've kept reasonable balance. Things to me in life that have to be imbalance, and I almost feel it in a physical way if I'm out of balance. My family life, my faith life, and my work life. What I tend to sacrifice, I have very few but very deep relationships with dear friends that become like family to me. But I don't have, I'm not the most social guy in the world. So that's what I sacrifice a little bit, very consciously so. But I can't tell you the number of times I landed from a 48-hour trip to Australia and went straight to coaching basketball. Tired as heck, but I'd take it all day long. Where that ends up today, this may sound incredibly sappy, but I will tell you it is absolutely true to me. Being a husband means more than being a CEO. Being a dad means more than being a chairman of the board. And little things mean more than big things to me. What I thought was big before seems small now, and vice versa. Today we're in a meeting, you guys don't know this, but I'm in a meeting with a bunch of bankers and lawyers and all this stuff's going on, and my phone rings, and it's our daughter Rachel. And everybody probably thought it was a super important call and that I walked out of the room to take. It was.
It was Rachel.
It was Rachel.
Yeah.
So, you find, I think, ways to manage a crazy schedule and still hopefully, be a decent husband and a decent dad.
Let's open up for questions. We have a student question. Yeah. We've got some mics coming around. Go ahead.
When it comes to decision making in any business and the speed at which you make a decision, especially in reference to your friend who you told no to bring that beneficial technology to pediatrics, how can you fine-tune your decision-making ability and your speed?
So remember when I talked about people bifurcate into those that say stuff's complex and simple? I would tell you it's super simple. Get the smartest people that you know into the room and put the big problem on the table and just talk about it. You'll solve it. That's how we manage decision-making every day at ViewRay. That's how we manage it at Spectranetics every day, at Valley Lab every day. You have to have a sense of humility that you hire people that are smarter than you and better than you. And if you don't do that, you're toast. But if you do that, you can accomplish anything. And the good part about being not quite as bright as all the people that work for you, they talk about you behind your back. It's not that funny. Be humble, hire smarter people, get them in a room, solve the problem.
Other questions? We'll open it up to everybody. Yeah. And if you wait for a second, we'll run a mic up to you so everyone can hear the question.
This is kind of a big general question, and if you don't want to answer it, I understand for business reasons, but would you talk about tort liability for medical devices, your experience with that?
Yeah, I've been sued so many times, I don't even know where to begin. The medical device industry is incredibly litigious, and the reason for it, pharma is too. If you look, there's this layer of, can I call it layer of scum in society that just does strike suits. I hope you're not one of them, Alan. But if a stock goes down more than 20%, you're automatically going to get sued today. And the reason why medtech firms and pharma firms are very common subjects of that is because you have these big binary events. You have a trial that goes well, you have a product launch that fails, and you have these binary events. So a 20% movement in a share price for a company like mine happens constantly. So you find yourself with strike suits way too often, my estimation. I think it's sad. I think it's actually a sad way to make a living. Then you have the whole med malpractice thing, and you have certain responsibilities as a manufacturer to provide safe and efficacious devices. So there's no shortage of opportunities to sue me, and people seem to be good at it. Would you add anything to that? Robert's our general counsel.
Look at Kelsey on the hustle.
Whoa,
getting
yeah,
his
that
mic.
was
I like
good.
it.
I would I'd echo that. It is there is an opportunistic and it's growing in terms of the strike suit thing. If you sell a company, you get sued. If you have a shift in price, if you change your guidance, and it's debilitating, it's expensive, and it's not value added. So I agree completely.
Yep.
With apologies, because I have to run, but I'll probably get thrown out saying this at law school. I think it's organized crime.
Yeah.
And
I
the
agree.
RICO.
I agree.
You're suing with no facts, persistently.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
I said, I said this to Brad. Phil's a friend and had such an impact in our community here.
Phil Weiser.
Phil
attorney-
Weiser, sorry, yeah.
Attorney General.
Our Attorney General. Somebody's got to do something about it, honestly. Those of you that are studying law, you could make a profound positive impact in the world by holding those law firms accountable to pay the costs associated with nonsense lawsuits. If they're meritorious, fine. Company ought to pay. If they're nonsense, which 90+% of them are, they ought to be on the hook and have accountability in it.
Other questions? Yeah.
So in your entirety of your career, if you're going to change one thing that you did in the past, what would you change?
So I've been in my work life now for 12 years. Thanks. I would be more grateful and more humble. I hope I exhibited a little bit of that along the way. But the older I get, the more grateful I get, and I think the more humble that I get. And I've seen now, in my own experience, and I think through, kind of objectively watching others, take two people that are kind of wired like me. They're ambitious and, not too dumb and whatever. And the one is really gracious and humble and thankful to even the bad bosses that they have, the things that they've learned from them. They thank them to their boss. They thank that same person when they're their peer. They thank that person when they're their boss and boss's boss and CEO, and have a sense of humility. And the other person doesn't. And they're just a hotshot, and they kind of know it. And when failure happens, which it's going to for all of us, especially anybody that really strives, the hotshot that has an edge and doesn't care about others, when they fail, human nature is people kind of enjoy their failure, right? It's not the nicest thing one can say about human nature, but it's true. Pete was a jerk, right? Look at him now. But the humble and grateful person is going to have their hard time. And I've watched time and again people run to that person and lift that person up. And I've been the beneficiary of that. I've seen it personally, and I've observed it in others. I would exhibit more of that earlier in my career.
I want to ask a question. I'm going to interject, which relates to something that you said before, which is that there's north of 30 team members that you currently have at ViewRay that are sort of part of the band that's played together before at Spectranetics or elsewhere. And thinking about some of the other successful companies in Colorado, for example, Zayo gets started, lots of folks that you had from previous connections at level 3 and before that. What's your view about the right amount of continuity in a team versus the right amount of new blood?
Super situational. ViewRay, I would tell you candidly, it was 911. We needed really good people, and we needed them fast. And we hired 100 people in our first 6 months on the job. I don't know, Val, maybe the number's more than that. We hired a copious amount of people. Now, we didn't bat 1,000, right? I know that. And we very methodically, work our way through. It's talent and strategy it's quarterly, but each one every 6 months, and we go deep, and then we hold ourselves accountable in between. In that instance, it was a lot, and I'm thrilled that we did it that way. In other companies, because ViewRay was really a technology that we surrounded with a company that we had to do very quickly. In other instances, you could probably overdo that, right? You could try to relive something in some form. But I have found in my career the best leaders are the ones that have great followership, and people want to go with Dan to 3 different companies, or Kramer did leave. And people just gravitate to positive cultures and mission, vision, values-based companies, and we're the beneficiary of that. And we don't say yes to everyone who wants to rejoin. We're thoughtful about it, and they have to compete in the open marketplace. But it doesn't seem super mysterious as to how much is too much or too little, because even if you get it wrong at first, you're not going to get it wrong over time if your calendar speaks.
We'll go back and then come forward. Yep.
So as a CEO of a public company, you have a lot of things to deal with. How do you, as a CEO, stay up to date with tech trends or kind of stay ahead of cutting edge technology? Do you rely on your employees, or kind of what are you doing on a day-to-day basis or month-to-month basis to know kind of what's hot?
Yeah, so I guess a few different answers to it. I do rely heavily on teammates for that, but I organize my life around my calendar. I can't tell you how serious I am about my calendar. It is a weapon of mass destruction, either in a good way or a bad way, because you can get lopsided fast, to your point, with all the things that you have responsibility for and you have to be kind of up to date on. So we have a chief medical officer. He's on the hook to send to me on a monthly basis the most important things I need to know clinically, and then he's also on the hook to have a conversation with me about it. And if I'm not smart enough, I've got to go back and do more homework. So to me, it's calendar management and being incredibly disciplined about it. Doesn't always work. I would tell you candidly right now, we're in the midst of a lot of stuff going on. I haven't read a clinical study in the last couple months, I would say. That might be a lie, maybe one, but I'm not as, there's times, there's periods of imbalance, but that's fine. I mean, that's the way it's got to be.
So I was just going to suggest you didn't touch on your time in California with Nilcor, Puritan Bennett, and then actually moving that company to Colorado. So perhaps it would be beneficial to the group to touch on what it was like to move a company to the state.
Yeah, we've had some experience doing that. So that was my wife putting me on the spot. It was, first and foremost, it was a job I shouldn't have taken. One of us knew that, one of us didn't. One of us took it more out of arrogance and hubris than thoughtfulness. And no, I'm kidding, it was me. It was a disaster of a company, and you talk about being, a lesson in culture. It was about a $1.6 billion revenue business, shrinking low to mid-single digits a year. We just paid our largest competitor over a $300 million IP lawsuit settlement, put ourselves in jail from a ability to develop products. My predecessors, talking about perverse incentives, this is back in the Dennis Kozlowski, Tyco International days. We were paid as leaders exclusively on EBIT growth year over year. So unless you had a real moral compass, if you were only about maximizing your income, there was an incredible opportunity to do 2 things: make a lot of money and ruin companies along the way. And my predecessors in California did just that. They were making 7 and 8 times their salary, fat salaries, a year in bonuses. And then that was being doubled if you made your cash kicker. And they took a 100-year-old company and ruined it. And it was extraordinary. And we made the decision, the only way that we thought we could fix it was uprooting and moving it here to Boulder. I've done that now with DaVita. We moved from California to Colorado. Nelcor Puritan Bennett from California to Colorado, and now ViewRay. I guess Colorado likes me more than California, but there's something just really good that's happening in this state. So it was a really, really hard time, hard transition, very learning intensive. Am I answering your question the right way, ma'am? Yeah, like I said, we had, you might remember these numbers better than I do. It was a $1.6 billion company. We had about 7,000 people around the world. We had about 500 at our headquarters, and we had 67 move. So we had to build a company of that size from the dust up. It was crazy.
Which raises a very interesting question. We'll go to the next one in a second. I don't have a sense about the existing talent, the skilled workforce when it comes to medical devices in the Front Range and in Colorado. What does that look like compared to other areas?
Hardest question we had to answer at Valley Lab, Tom, you'll attest. When we were hiring people hand over fist, the number one thing that people would say in an interview is, gosh, it sounds like what you guys are doing is really cool. You don't seem awful. Maybe I'd come to work here, but if it doesn't work out, what do I do? And that was a really hard question to answer because I couldn't point to 10 companies around that were in the medical device landscape. Now we can, which is so cool, and it has a lot to do with what the team did. We had Valley Lab here that grew bananas. We had Nelcor Puritan Bennett that we moved from California to here. That was a lot of jobs. And DaVita, lots of other Spectranetics, lots of companies now are in the area, and there's such a tech presence here. If you're looking for engineers of any sort, software, hardware, mechanical, electrical, this is just such a great hotbed and a fantastic place to live. I'm a bit biased, but I just love it here.
Super interesting. So just to make this put a fine point on it, I heard that in theory 5 or 10 years ago. I am hearing it across other sectors. You're finding that you go to recruit someone on the technology team or someone from one of the coasts, it's a completely different deal today than, say, 15 years ago.
Night and day. And the other thing that's different between California and Colorado, you try to move somebody from Ohio to California. It's crazy what you have to pay them. First of all, they don't want to go. Second of all, and there's things that are beautiful about California, don't get me wrong, but there's so much friction associated with that. Take that same person and try to move them to Colorado. Just try to get out of their way. I mean, they Katie barred the door. They're all about it. So, this is a great place to build a company.
So glad you raised that. Thank you. Got time for 2 more questions here, and then we'll go over here. Yep.
Hi. So you talked about how you wanted to be a CEO right out of high school. I'm interested on hearing how you felt about your career as it developed, and if you felt as if you were on that path all along it, or if there were points where you really felt like you wanted to push forward or improve upon your career in one way or another.
Yeah, first of all, it just hurts to hear that, you guys. It's an embarrassing thought. I felt like I was on the path. I remember kind of between that first management job that I mentioned and the general management job, a guy named Kevin Gould, who was our chief operating officer, total New England guy, said to me, if 5 words were good, he would use 3. But he basically said, you ought to be careful about how fast you're making these moves. And he didn't sit down and counsel me and talk about it and tell me how you're feeling. Right, he just said those words and moved on. And it didn't make any sense to me until I got that promotion. And I was like, holy smokes. At that point, I realized the risk that I took. And in retrospect, Billy and I talk about this, broadening your skill base earlier is probably way less risky than what I did. If you happen to take the silly path that I took, be willing to say, I don't know. Be willing to say, explain it to me at an 8th grade level. And have a recipe, whether it's ARD, strategy, execution, culture, or if you improve upon it, by all means follow it, and don't be a hypocrite. Bless you.
Hi, my name is Jeremy. Obviously, you're very successful, but I'd like to ask you kind of a vulnerable question. What is your greatest failure or mistake, and what did you learn from it?
And what I learned from it?
Yeah.
I would say my greatest failure has nothing to do with business. If I could go back in time, I would treat my wife even better than I have. That's a total honest answer. I can't unsay some things that I've said or undo some things that I've done. And in business, you can knuckle through it. I'd be a better husband. I know how to be a better husband today than I did 25 years ago. I wish I knew then what I know now, more there than what I know in the business world now than then, if that makes any sense.
So I'm going to personalize this a little bit about where we are as a campus and the entrepreneurship program. I literally ran in to do this interview because I was with students down at the Colorado State Penitentiary today with a program called Defy that I know some of you guys have been involved with. It teaches business skills and entrepreneurship in the prisons. An incredibly powerful day. I see a lot of students who are here for a fantastic discussion. I feel like I've got the best job in the world. We've got a reception going over here to the right. Please, my right, your left, please join us for the reception. But first, please help me give a warm thank you to Scott. This is great.
Thank you. That was so fun.
Thank you so much for doing it.
That's great. Thank you, guys.